What's up everyone, this is Jono. Now in this video, I'm going to talk to you about jobs in DevRel or developer relations. I'm going to walk through the 3 different types of jobs that are out there, what I look for in a great DevRel person, and then how to go and hire people in the most efficient and effective way. Okay, so lots to dig into today. Now, when we think about DevRel, for some folks, they think about this guy, right? Do you remember him? Shingy, the AOL digital prophet. Now, I know what you're thinking. All right, Jono, you're going to be a bit snarky about this guy because you're envious of his hair. Now that is only, I'd say, about 80% true. But the reason why this guy became a little bit of a joke was because he seemed to go out there with these big ideas, this big hair, these general principles, and didn't have a lot of substance. And some people kind of look at DevRel people in a similar kind of light. And I think there's kind of some truth to that and there's some fiction to that. There are some people out there in DevRel who do go out there and they do a lot of evangelism and they talk about the benefits of a product or a service, but in many cases that work doesn't tie directly into the benefits to a business. And sometimes those folks don't last in a company for all that long. And the reason why this can happen is because the expectations of the company and the services that the DevRel person is providing are not aligned. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's really important for us to get specific on the types of roles that are out there so you bring in the right kind of person. Because you could have the best evangelist in the world, but if you bring them into a company who doesn't need evangelism yet, they're not going to be successful, okay? So let's first of all dig into the different types of DevRel roles that are out there, all right? Now there's 3 different types of roles as I see it. And this is a little tricky because this is not completely clear cut. You're going to find that there's going to be some blurring in each of these. So this may not line up with exactly what you've seen, but this is what I'm generally seeing in the companies that I work with, okay? Now the first type of role is a director of DevRel. So this is going to be somebody who comes in, they're pretty senior, and they are running a function inside of a company, right? They're there to build out the DevRel strategy. They hire people, they bring them into a team, they manage a budget, and they build cross-team collaboration. They're working with the marketing team and the product team and the engineering team. They're invariably going to be reporting into a senior leader, such as the CEO or maybe a VP of marketing or someone along those lines, okay? But it's a senior leader. Now, the second type of role is what I would refer to as a community manager. So this is going to be somebody who generally is going to be showing up into the community every single day and making sure that the community is happy and engaged and thriving, okay? Now, these people are going to be experts in Discord or Slack or Discourse or HireLogic or Circle or whichever platform you're using, and they're going to be building hundreds and hundreds of different relationships, creating content, running events and things like that. And then the third type of role is more of an evangelist, right? This person is the sales wing of community, right? They're going to go out there, they're going to do outreach, they're going to do advocacy, they're going to be speaking at conferences, creating content, doing social media, creating amazing demos and things like that. These are the folks who go out there and bang the drum and make everything super exciting. But this is what I think you need to know about DevRel and what I think is really important here. And I kind of alluded to this earlier on. And that is that if you go out and you find an evangelist, right, and you bring them into your company, and if that person goes and bangs the drum and they make loads of noise about your developer product or service or whatever it is, right, those people come excited to learn more and you don't nurture them through the journey effectively, then you're going to lose them, right? The analogy I would have here is it's like in digital marketing, right? You got to have your funnel in place before you run your ads. Ads are a tool that you use to go and pull traffic into your funnel, but if your funnel's not working, then that traffic is going to be wasted, it's going to be squandered, okay? So this is why the sequencing of who you bring into your company is really important, especially for earlier stage companies, right? If you're a founder watching this, if you're a co-founder watching this, this is really important, okay? So how do we approach the sequencing of this? Well, as a general rule, I would recommend you bring in a community manager first. Right? This is going to be somebody who's going to come in and set up the backbone of your community. They're going to get your community platform up and running. Usually these folks are reasonably decent at creating content and have some level of evangelism skills. It varies from community manager to community manager, but they're going to get kind of the mechanism in place. You know, one thing that you may have seen in my videos is where I talk about like building really intentional, predictable flow in how you bring people into your community. In many cases, the community managers are going to be implementing a lot of those things that I'm talking about, okay? So community manager is what I'd recommend you bring in first. Then is a good time to bring in the evangelist, right? This is the person you bring in. You've got your community infrastructure in place, right? You know if somebody shows up, they're going to be getting a ton of value when they come in there. And then they're going to be nurtured through, you know, getting a ton of value, it being introduced into the community, lots of content, conversations and discussions and things like that. Now, when you've got that in place, you can go out, grab the evangelists, right? Well, not grab them, that's a little aggressive. Go hire an evangelist who's going to go and bang the drum and drive that traffic, right? This is evangelists are going to hate this description, right? But this is the analogy with the digital marketing world is this is going to be the person who's running the ads, right? The ad person pulls the traffic in, the evangelist pulls the people in, okay? So that's number 2. And then I think it's a good time to bring in a director of DevRel, somebody who's got a ton of experience, because now you've got a department, right? Your community manager, your your community manager, your evangelist is probably going to report into this director of DevRel. And they're going to manage the team, make sure that they're happy, make sure that they're executing, and work with the other teams in the company to make sure that everything's up and running. Now, here's a really important thing. When I say community manager here, and you're looking at people to kind of come into that role, they may call themselves DevRel people, because this is a profoundly irritating element of just the world of DevRel right now, is that there is no consistency in titles. So if you've got one person who does DevRel, they may be great at community management and they don't do as much evangelism. You might find somebody else in DevRel who's an amazing evangelist and they don't do as much community management. And then you may find somebody who is generally pretty decent at both, okay? This is designed to make your life more difficult as a founder, okay? So I'm sorry about that on behalf of all DevRel people. Let's be clear, it's not my fault, it's somebody else's fault. I don't know who it is, but it's their fault, okay? But there is no real consistency here, okay? But what are the kind of things that you should be looking for, right? When you're thinking about, okay, what goes into a good person, like a good community manager, a good evangelist, you know, a good DevRel lead? Well, when you're thinking about the general principles, there's a couple of things I would recommend you focus on here. The first one is going to be a clear nurture approach, right? So this is going to be where you bring somebody in, certainly in the early stages of a company, and they can design that clear, consistent, nurtured flow, right? Now, I like to do it by you identify your audience, you identify their pain points, you bring them in with a lot of value, very low friction, you serve them with a ton of value with email and other stuff, then you bring them into your community, you have consistent content and conversations every week. I've talked about this elsewhere on my YouTube channel. You can go and check out those videos. But building that systematic process, that funnel, if you will, you definitely want someone to be doing that, right? So if you're just starting out building out a DevRel function in your company, definitely bring someone who can build those kinds of funnels out, okay? Another thing that you're going to want to look for is going to be great content or content, depending on whether you can read my writing or not. This is someone who can create blog posts, social media. Ideally, if they can do video content, that's great, because there's a real kind of relationship is formed when you make videos and talk to people like I'm talking to you right now. You get a sense of my personality with this video, whereas you wouldn't get as much of that in my blog post, for example. So good content creation is something to look for. One thing that is really critical here as well is you want to bring in across the board, whether it's a community manager, an evangelist, or whether it's a director of DevRel, someone who's really data-driven. Numbers drives change, right? And there's this kind of cop-out in the DevRel world and the community management world. Well, we can't really measure things, man, because it's all like, you know, community, dude, and like, you know, it's all about feelings and empathy. It's like, that is just such nonsense, right? There are two sides of the coin when it comes to communities. There is the extrinsic value that you can measure. There's a lot of stuff that you can measure in a spreadsheet, but there is a ton of stuff you can't measure, right? You can't measure the impact of empathy, of kindness, of mentoring, of collaboration in those different mechanisms. The real magic of community you'll never be able to measure and put into a spreadsheet. But to say that that is everything is a total cop-out, right? So what we want to make sure that we do is we focus on measuring the things that we can measure. You know, for example, when I'm thinking about communities, right? 20% active users. That's, you know, as one such example, 20% DAU, MAU is what I'm looking for, right? I like to go for 10% month-on-month growth in your community platforms. Like, we can measure these things right now. Okay, so those are the kind of things that I'm looking for. But you want someone who's going to look at numbers every week and say, okay, awesome. This is what we need to do. Like, oh, I'm looking at the numbers this week. We're only at 10% active users, right? Let's see what we can do. What can we do to kind of juice those numbers to get more people becoming active, things like that, okay? The other thing you're going to be obviously want to look for here is going to be awareness building, right? right? This is usually going to sit with the evangelist. But even if you bring in a community manager at the beginning of your journey, having somebody who's going to be able to build some level of awareness, somebody who's going to be a bit active on social media, some blogging, maybe submitting some of your news to the website, submitting things into Hacker News, things like that, is really valuable. Now, the other one here, this is really important, right, is cross-functional support, right? One of the fairly significant risks that I see with people who run DevRel is they tend to operate in a bit of a silo, right? Is you've got a DevRel individual or a team that's forming, and they go out and do their thing, and sometimes they just want to do their own thing, and they don't necessarily interact or engage with other members of the company, right? Because they're the experts, and they feel like they're the experts, and they should be kind of left to their own devices. And you want to make sure that you're not blocking your DevRel folks in their decision making, that you're not standing in the way of them being creative and innovative, because DevRel really is a very creative art form, right? And you want to unlock that creativity, right? And sometimes the best creativity kind of sits on the margins, right? If you think about the very best musicians in history who've like really kind of changed the game with music, it's always the people kind of in the margins. It's Bob Dylan, and it's the Beatles, and it's Jimi Hendrix, and it's Iron Maiden, and I had to get Iron Maiden in there for obvious reasons. You know, these people weren't conventional. They did something different, right? And your DevRel people are going to be a little bit different, right? Some of your DevRel people, they're going to be a little funky, right? And you probably know this already, but you want them to be a bit funky. But you also want them to interact with your company, because your company is a machine. It should be a well-oiled machine. One of the things that bugs me about some DevRel people, and this is not all DevRel people, is there's become a growing view of like, well, I won't work with marketing teams. I refuse to report into marketing. And I think it's such an ignorant perspective, because I've worked with, across my career, I've worked with hundreds of different companies as a consultant. Lots of companies in my community leadership core, accelerator as well, right? And I've met many, 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 many amazing marketing leaders, CMOs, SVPs, VPs of marketing, who really understand developers, who get developers, who know what we need to do to really drive an amazing developer experience, right? And to just say I'm not going to work with marketing is just so ridiculous to me. It's like, evaluate the human being, evaluate the team first before you make such a generalized judgment statement, right? Now, there are some marketing people that I've met over the course of my career who just undoubtedly suck, and they're terrible. They don't understand developers. Everything's got to be boiled down into an irritating process that takes too long. You know, tweets need 15 rounds of creative review before it can go out. Those people suck, and they generally don't last too long at a business, okay? So, but you've got to focus on building cross-functional support. So bringing in somebody in who's able to build those relationships with other people, I think is really, really important, okay? The other thing as well that's really important here when we get a little bit more specific in terms of cross-functional support is the product to DevRel relationship, okay? Let's say, for the sake of argument, your company is building a developer API, right? Like, you want developers to build apps with your SDK or API. So the product team are building the actual toolkit. They're building the actual API. Your DevRel team is going to be an amazing source of insight and perspectives, right? One of the things that is so valuable about building DevRel and so valuable about building communities is that it provides the ability for us to see our blind spots, right? Every human being in the world, including me, including you, we've all got blind spots, the things that we're not seeing around us, right? We go into the world, we've got things that we want to achieve, intentions that we want to focus on, and we could be the most well-meaning people in the world, but there's going to be some things we're not going to see because we're too close to the flame, right? In the DevRel world, this can often be things like, the onboarding experience for using this API, the company feels like it's a lot more obvious than it actually is. And sometimes the areas where people get stuck in these kinds of onboarding flows can be with like a step in the documentation, for example. And in the tech world, sometimes people can say, well, that's not going to be confusing to a developer because developers are smart people, right? And yes, developers are smart people, but developers are also allowed to get confused sometimes, right? So when you've got your DevRel folks who are in the mix and they're working with all of these different developers out there, You want to make sure that the very best insight from those DevRel, from those conversations with DevRel are feeding into the product team, right? If you've got a product team that is of the view, well, the DevRel people, they just talk to the developers and we just focus on the products with the product people or the engineering people, right? You're missing a huge amount of value here. So having a predictable flow where insight and perspectives from DevRel flows into product, and also incorporating your developer community into the product flow is helpful as well. So let's say you've got a new feature that you want to roll out. Getting a bunch of your more active DevRel, your developers in your DevRel community to kind of beta test it, to try it out, to give it a go, is really powerful, right? Treat your audience as genuine stakeholders, not people that you just spoon feed technology to, but ask them for guidance. Be vulnerable. Say, hey, what are we doing that sucks for you right now? Like, what should we be doing that we're not doing right now, right? Those are going to build really amazing experiences. And when you set that up, your DevRel team will thrive, because the biggest challenge that DevRel people have is in building that really authentic relationship with that audience. And the more your company operates in a, you know what, we're human beings, we're not perfect, we haven't got all the answers, but we're going to do our damnedest to make sure that we can build the best possible tech for you folks. When you have that level of vulnerability and transparency with your audience, you are going to enable your DevRel people to do even better work. Okay? And then, this is the final one, right? Is humility. Humility is really, really critical. And 98% of DevRel people that I've ever met are super humble, very thoughtful people. But there are a handful of people out there who are not humble, right? Because they've got a bunch of Twitter followers and, you know, people clap at them at conferences and they believe that they are, you know, they have some level of superiority. And in many cases, when I see that kind of behavior, it's a tell. It's a tell that these people are insecure, they need the attention, there's something else going on, and I think we should be thoughtful in recognizing that. Like, some people will say, oh, they suck, right? I think we should be thoughtful in the fact that people may be struggling with imposter syndrome or a lack of confidence or whatever. But you want to make sure that humility is baked into every member of your team, not just into your DevRel folks. Because when you bring ego into a company, it can cause all kinds of problems. Because I think in many cases it turns into death by 1,000 paper cuts, because all of those little egotistical interactions, they build up, and people often don't confront them because in themselves they are tiny little incidences. But you want to make sure that you manage this. If you find somebody who is a bit of a rock star in DevRel, they've got a bit of ego, I just highlight it and just say, look, we love what you're doing amazing work, we'd like to bring you into the company, but humility is a core value of what we've got here. We want you to be proud. But we also just want to manage it and make sure that, like, your success in DevRel is a significant chunk of your success is the success of others, right? That's why I always say to managers is, like, your success is your team being successful. So in any leadership role, this is especially important, right? Is humility, because it can be quite debilitating when ego kind of infects different companies. Okay, so those are some of the things I'd recommend you look at. Just especially for those of you who are going to be hiring someone, just to recap, like, somebody who can build out really clear nurture. Like, don't just throw people into a Discord, right? Have people nurtured from one step to the next in bringing people through the journey, okay? People who can create great content. People who are very data driven. Like, they look at data every single week and they say, what is this telling us? How do we make decisions? How do we make changes based upon the data? People who have got a level of experience when it comes to awareness building. Even your community managers who might not be outright evangelists, the evangelists should know how to build awareness, should have a level of awareness building experience. People who are willing and able to build cross-functional support. People who don't have ignorance around, I'm not going to work with marketing, I'm not going to work with engineering, I'm not going to work with whoever, right? You don't want that. That's terrible. Making sure that DevRel and product are like just two best buds who are kind of working, collaborating together, and then humility, all right? So these are the kind of things I'd recommend you look for. Now, how do you then go out, right, and hire a great DevRel person into your company? This is now the next question. So what I want to do now is I want to talk about really, essentially, there's kind of two ways of doing this, right? That I want to walk through. Now, the first way is that you find someone who's got more experience. Let me move my mouse out of the way so that looks good. That looked terrible for a moment there, didn't it? Look at that. Hang on. Look. Oh, it's not doing it anymore. Never mind. Quality, Jono, quality. So one approach is that you find someone who's got a lot more experience, right? They've been doing it for years. They've probably been doing it for 5 or 10 or 15 years, right? When it comes to salaries, as I record this in 2023, depending on where they're living, sometimes these people can command a lot of money. There can be like over $250,000 a year. If he's talking about like more expensive places where people live, like New York, San Francisco, then sometimes that amount is going to be going up, right? And there are many benefits of bringing in somebody in who's got a bunch of experience, right? You know, these people are usually battle hardened. They've been there, they've done that. Often they're great at building that cross-functional collaboration. They've got a strong network. They seem to know everybody, right? They're well liked in their network, but there's some downsides, right? In many cases, they're a little bit reluctant to roll up their sleeves and do the work themselves. And consequently, that means that they can expect that they're going to be bringing in some junior staff members to work for them who will roll up their sleeves and do the work. And then also, honestly, you'll still get variable levels of results. I know some people in the DevRel space who have been doing it for a long time. I've worked with them directly, and the results haven't been, in my personal opinion, worth the amount of money that they are commanding, right? Now, this is a relatively smaller proportion of people, right? I think most people in DevRel are usually pretty good with a ton of experience. But just because you bring someone in who's been doing it for a long time doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be delivering really clear, consistent results. And in many cases, because they're not a good fit, right? Like they may come into your business, they're not right for you, and therefore they're just not a good match, okay? Now, the second approach is that you find someone who is a little bit more junior, right? So they're kind of newer in their career, maybe not younger in terms of age, just newer in their career, right? Usually, this is going to be kind of 80 to 120K, depending on, again, on where they live. It's kind of bugging me that I didn't put a K next to the 80 there. Is that annoying you as well? If that's annoying you, put it in the... Actually, don't put it in the comments. I don't need that negativity. Just email me, jono@jonobacon.com. That is going to bother me. This bothered me when I first put the slides together, and then I didn't fix it because quality. So there's some benefits of bringing someone who's a little younger, a little bit more junior in, right? First of all, you typically will get enormous levels of enthusiasm, right? And I remember, for example, when I joined Canonical and I was working on Ubuntu, and I just got the job as Ubuntu community manager, and I'll never forget, I was awake all night. I was so excited that I'd got this job. And the reason why I was excited is because I felt like it was my shot. I was like, this is, Jono, this is yours to waste. This is yours to squander, okay? So I went into this job like just both feet stuck on the ground, you know, both hands clear on the keyboard, like ready to roll. I was like, I'm gonna do everything that I can to make this work, okay? And you often get that with people who are kind of newer. This is a huge opportunity for them. With the people who are a little bit more experienced, or a lot more experienced, they're like, okay, this is just another opportunity for me, right? And you do get that with people with more experience. I don't want to have too much of a broad brush, but with, you know, if you find someone who's got like that real enthusiasm, that this is their shot in their career, they are definitely worth having a conversation with. The other element here is that there's often a significant willingness to learn, and also if you do a great job with these folks and you mentor and you support them, they'll be super loyal to your company. Like I was at Canonical for nearly 8 years because I was loyal to the project, I was loyal to the company. The people who gave me a shot there, Mark Shuttleworth, Jane Silber, people like that, they will always be, I'll forever be indebted to them for giving me that chance. But there are some downsides, right? They kind of have a little bit more limited experience because they are by definition more junior. In the vast majority of cases, they need a bunch of active mentoring. And also, in many cases, they lack the organizational chops. They're not used to working in an environment where you have these kind of relationships between a marketing team and a DevRel team and a product team and an engineering team, and the dynamics of dealing with executive staff and taking in stakeholder requirements. And sometimes they get a little freaked out when things don't go right in a public setting and the community get mad about something. This is all completely normal. So mentoring is super important here, right? And this actually leads me to something I want to mention to you. So I've built an accelerator. It's called the Community Leadership Core. And this is an invitation-only accelerator where I help companies to maximize the ROI and the investment that they're making in their community, in their DevRel teams. I provide like customized roadmaps and training, and we have group coaching. You get one-on-one access to me throughout this as well. And this is a great facility frankly, for all companies who are investing in building community to kind of support your team and get better results. But especially if you've got people in your team who may be a little bit more junior, it's a great way to provide that mentoring, right? Because many execs that I know are like, I don't know how to mentor somebody. I don't know how to support this person and help them to be successful. So the Community Leadership Core is something you might want to consider. You can find a link down there, communityleadershipcore.com, where you can find out more about it. But where do we begin? Like, where do we find this? Well, the ideal place to find the right kind of person, especially someone who's new to your company, is going to be in the middle, right? If you can find someone who's a little bit more junior, but they've got some experience that's relevant, maybe they've done some engineering, maybe they were a developer, maybe they're participating in some open source projects, something along those lines, that's a great fit, right? Or if you've got someone who has got some experience, they're a bit more junior, but they've also built some communities outside of work. Maybe it's a book club, or maybe it's they set up a React user group, or whatever it might be, right? Those skills still apply, right? So as a general rule for new companies, I'd recommend go for someone who's a little bit more junior. You can bring them in better under budget, provide the mentoring, get them into the Community Leadership Core. I think I'll be able to help you out there and go from there. Now, just before I wrap this up, I know this is kind of a long video, but I want to make sure I'm really comprehensive here, because within this, I typically will get, whenever I talk to people about this topic, typically people will always ask me 3 questions. And I want to dig into these 3 questions to make sure this is as comprehensive as possible. And by the way, right, let's just take a moment, because what you should do right now is you should go and hit that like button, and you should make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I think this might help, hopefully. And if you think this is helpful, then you should come and check out more videos, and if you subscribe, you'll see them when they go out. Blah-de, blah-de, blah-de. You've seen other YouTubers say the same spiel over and over again. But what are the 3 questions? Well, the first one is, how much domain experience should I look for in these folks? Well, as a general rule within DevRel, you definitely, the more domain experience that somebody's got, the better, right? And the way I look at it is it's kind of like a sliding scale, right? So we can kind of think of it a little bit like this, right? So you've got this sliding scale, right? This is somebody who has no experience, and this is somebody who is you, right? So this is you as a human being, and this is somebody who's got no experience in what you're doing, right? And the closer you get to you, the better, right? So, for example, if you're a company that's got like a front-end developer platform, if you've got somebody who knows your product, has used it, they've been contributing into your community for a bunch of time, and so they're kind of here, then great, they're perfect, right? But you may find somebody who has familiarity with just front-end development frameworks in general. Maybe it's not your specific technology, maybe it's something else, and they're here, they're a great candidate as well. But if we go over here, maybe it's somebody who's not familiar with front-end, but they're familiar with engineering. They've maybe done some back-end engineering, or maybe they've done some AI engineering and programming. They might be over here, right? And I think that's still great as well. And then you might have somebody over here who has no software development experience, but is a fan of software engineering, and they might be here, right? So I would say, obviously you prefer the people further to the right. So if you can find somebody who knows your tech, your industry inside out, brilliant. You definitely want to have somebody who understands the developer mindset, who understands the developer experience. Ideally, they're a developer. If they're not a developer, well, you could pepper them with a bunch of questions about what it's like to be a developer, and they'll be able to answer them. That's how I would approach it, okay? Second question, should we hire someone who's Twitter famous, right? So they've got, 30,000 people, 40,000 people on Twitter, 100,000 people on Twitter. Everybody seems to know them. I keep seeing them at conferences, and that people talk about them. Should we hire those people? It depends. I would not make that a top priority, right? Instead, what I'd recommend you do is evaluate these things first, because there are a bunch of people out there. I'm not going to BS you. There's a bunch of people out there who are Twitter famous. I've worked with some of them, and they're just not very good, because what they're great at doing is they're great at building a personal brand, but you don't want somebody who's there to build their personal brand as the primary goal. The primary goal here is to build an amazing developer experience around your tool, your technology, your product, your service, right? If they can continue to grow their personal brand as part of that work, then great. We don't want to stop someone from building their personal brand. But if that's going to be their priority, then you do not want to hire that person into your business, okay? Because that will be their priority and your work will come second, okay? Now, some people have this attribute to them. Some people don't have this attribute to them. I would argue that there's more people in DevRel have got the right balance, but there is a larger number of people who are very focused on their own personal brand than I would like, and you just got to be mindful of that. Okay, so make sure when you're interviewing, when you're getting to know folks, you can sniff that out. But just because they got a ton of followers on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, doesn't necessarily they're going to be brilliant. Okay, so it's just something to evaluate. And then the third question here is, where do they report into? This is always the juicy one, right? So this is how I tend to think of it. If you've got, let me take a step back. When I was at Canonical, which is where I really started thinking about that, I reported into, initially I reported to Mark Shuttleworth, who's the founder of Canonical, because whenever there was like a significant new position in the company, he'd have them reporting into him for about a year. And then they'd go and report in somewhere else. So I was reporting into him for about a year. And then I went and reported into the CTO, this guy called Matt Zimmerman, who ran the engineering management team, right? So that was the team who was doing managing the kernel engineering, the desktop engineering, the server engineering, the foundations engineering, and then I was on that team. The best possible place I could have reported, right? Because every week, every management call that we had, I'd be listening in and learning about what the teams were building. So I was aware of that within the project. It built those close personal bonds where they could rely on me as they were working on the community, and I could rely on them where there was community involvement. Okay, it was great. So if you've got an open source project, if you're an open core company, I would recommend your DevRel person reports into engineering. Okay, the caveat to this is if you have a particularly technical, tech-savvy, developer-centric marketing team, then it might make sense to report in there as well. And in some cases, people report into product. I don't see that as much. And in some cases, people report into the CEO, and I don't see that as much as well. Although I think, especially for very senior people, I think reporting into the CEO is going to become more and more of a thing. All right, I know this was a bit of a long video. If you got to this point, by the way, I'm just going to high five you, because that you just watched half an hour of me driveling on about DevRel roles, and that's very impressive. Although you should probably go and reconsider your life choices. But I hope this was useful. If you like this video, hit that like button. I believe people say you should smash it. I'd prefer if you smashed it instead of just hitting it. And then also make sure that you subscribe to the channel so you can get the new videos when they come out. And I'll see you folks on the next one.